Mark Dwan is a long-term co-worker with Camphill Communities, and he's also been very proactive and progressive in producing renewable energy strategies for Ballytobin and also at the forefront of new housing strategies for Camphill. So Mark's going to be the chair today of the co-housing panel.
Thank you, Rosie. I hope I can live up to that description of myself. I'll do my best. Thank you, Minister and Phelan, for coming today. And today is all about collaboration and working together, and we need our representatives in government. And I like that you put such emphasis on the whole human aspect of our whole work together. It's about creating better places to live and about human welfare and human well-being. Okay, our discussion now is on co-housing and new neighbourhoods, and I'm very conscious of our time, even more so than this morning, because Teddy Cruz is lined up on GMT, not GIT. GMT is Greenwich Mean Time, and GIT is Generous Irish Time. Teddy is not on GIT. Okay, co-housing. It's very nice that we had that whole backdrop this morning, because co-housing is something that can maybe just be placed into that backdrop as a kind of an approach to housing solutions. And it's a very particular kind of housing solution. And I'm not going to explain all that because we have our eminent speakers to do that. I just wanted to join one dot up this morning with Andrea and Rory's contribution. It's a little bit to do with Anfield. Rory had these lovely graphs of the line going downwards, less and less social housing. And I just wondered, in the soccer world, wages are going up. And I wonder, is there a correlation there? Anyway, the wage bill of Chelsea would build a lot of housing units, and Liverpool. So to describe to us what indeed co-housing is, we have Davie to start us off. And Davie is well known in the sustainability world, and he's been a pioneer of the Cloughjordan housing project. So Davie, I'll leave it to you.
Thanks, Mark. So we have very little time, so I'll dive straight in. I'm interested in citizen-led developments, how we build healthier communities to live and work in, and to sort of reconnect with each other and the place and environment that we belong to. So for the last 15 years, I've been involved in Cloughjordan Ecovillage, which is an example of community coming together to provide more of its needs. And in 2003, we found Cloughjordan. And so Cloughjordan Ecovillage is a bit of a misnomer. We're actually an eco-neighbourhood in an existing town of Cloughjordan. This is the site before we started building houses in 2008. It's a 67-acre estate that comes right into the main street of Cloughjordan. And where there was a T-junction, we now have a crossroads connecting completely to the existing settlement. We have a master plan that tries to bring the elements together that would create a more sustainable neighbourhood. We have, on the bottom, all of the houses. They're high-performance houses. We now have 6.5% of all of Ireland's A-rated houses in our little estate. We have 55 houses built with 130 plots. So there's plenty of space. If after this presentation you're interested, come and talk to me. We have 1/3 of the estate is tree planted. We've planted almost 20,000 trees now, 2,500 Irish apple trees and 17,000 trees in a native woodland that we call our community woodlands. We have renewable energy for our heating. We have the largest solar array in Ireland for solar thermal, not quite working properly. We have 2 woodchip boilers that provide heat to all the houses through a district heating main. Through a 1.5 kilometre pipeline. We've got a CSA farm, community supported agriculture, which I'm really surprised there's not more of. Communities coming together, making a relationship with a farmer and securing a food supply. We're now feeding 60 families from our 12 acres on the eco-village. And those families aren't just eco-villagers. That includes about 1/3 of the membership from Cloughjordan itself. So it's a great bridge building project. Of course, we're highlighting, promoting biodiversity, and we have a large community enterprise centre we create, which has now Ireland's first community fab lab, which is a digital fabrication lab using 3D printers and all these sort of computer-controlled machines. So we're really embracing technology, but with the purpose of looking at how we appropriately use this to build our community's resilience or our sustainability and allow us to prototype things that we need. Now, all of these things are very visible things. That's not what makes a healthy neighbourhood or indeed a sustainable neighbourhood. What we need are structures that allow us, the people, to connect, to engage, to make decisions together. We don't vote. There's 110 of us. We don't vote. We never have voted. That means that we're taking a bit more time trying to bring everyone on through consensus. And we have a really good system that moves us away from a command and control hierarchy to distribute responsibilities and decision-making across the membership, which I think is really important. So what we're trying to do is model the transition to a low-carbon society, which will become more and more a top priority across the world, not just Ireland or Europe. So we have just measured with Tipperary Energy Agency and Limerick University. We measured our ecological footprint as a baseline for the work that we're going to do over the next decades, cranking that down. We were surprised to find that we're already a third of the Irish average footprint, 2.2 gigahectares, which they measure it. An easy way to know that is it's almost one planet. So we're coming in on one planet living. If we all lived the way that most Irish people live, we'd need 3 planets. If we all lived like most Americans, we need 5 planets. Unfortunately, we've only got one, so we have to learn to live on one planet. We have to learn to live within the carrying capacity of this planet. And the surprising thing was in our ecological footprint was that it wasn't just our farm, our car clubs, our high-performance houses. It was the sense of cohesion, the researchers said, the amount that we could do together and the amount we collaborated that actually brought our ecological footprint down. So that's really interesting when we start to think about neighbourhoods that are healthier, is that it's not just these technologies and renewable energies and the things that we can touch and feel. It's actually the way that we put our human systems together and start to see ourselves as ecosystems of innovation rather than ecosystems in our individual little boxes, watching little boxes, shopping in big boxes, and actually out of our boxes. And I think community and the idea of co-housing is really about our well-being and our mental health. I think the mental health epidemic we're facing now is because we're living completely as individuals. Great for the economy, but not good for us as humans, and definitely not good in our interactions then with our planet. So I'm interested in co-housing, and a number of us at the Ecovillage have started to come together for a number of reasons to put together Cloughjordan Co-Housing. So co-housing really in definition usually has common space. Now the Ecovillage could be seen as co-housing because we've got loads of common space, but not a common house. Our co-housing, we want to own the land cooperatively through a housing co-op in this area at the top of the Ecovillage. So this is the 130 sites. This area was 10 sites, and we're probably going to have at least maybe 20 units on that, but with a common house, with the assets that usually idle in our own house. We don't all need to have a washing machine in our house we use once a week, or it'd be much better to have a big walk-in freezer than 20 little individual freezers. This is good for us and it's good for our wallet, but it's also good for our planet. So this is the area we're looking at, and co-housing quite typically revolves around this courtyard idea. So we're looking out onto a shared space, a really healthy space, especially bringing up kids or just to have that shared environment that we can enjoy together. Now, we are at an advantage in Cloughjordan Co-Housing because we're actually putting it in already established Ecovillage, which has lots of shared facilities, allotments, community gardens, a community farm, but still the idea of the common house with the shared assets that allows us to make this more affordable, which is really one of the key drivers for a lot of us is affordability. But at the same time, we're modelling this transition to a low-carbon society. How do we live in a way that we can reduce our ecological footprint? And really, we're going to have to do that together. Ireland has a rich tradition of cooperatives, and yet we've probably lost the capacity to actually cooperate with each other. So we've got to learn new competencies in working together, bring new structures together that allow us to cooperate and collaborate together. And I think that's what's missing in a lot of the projects that we see, whether it's an environmental project or a community project, is that we're still stuck in the individualistic mode, and that we need to move to this sort of seeing ourselves and our communities as ecosystems, with the relationships then and the health of the relationships between the parts of those human systems as being the indicator of their sustainability and their health. And at the same time, we can crank down there. So some of the objectives that we're looking at is to address issues of affordability, and especially for Cloughjordan Ecovillage, and to provide access for both youth, but also elderly and special needs. So there's a number of things we're doing. It's also a desire to live in smaller spaces, but also to have those common spaces that allow us to actually live in smaller spaces, because you've got access to the resources and assets that you need. And you don't need to have them in your own house. So I'm conscious I'm 26 seconds over time, so I'm going to stop. Thank you.
Davie actually set up the first part of my presentation perfectly there, talking about the need for us to work and live together better. Our future is urban, and I don't know if we've completely accepted that. Ireland became, the balance in Ireland between urban and rural living tilted in 1970 when we crossed that 50% threshold. I mean, now in the world, 54% of the people live in towns and cities, and that pattern is growing. It's more and more people are moving to towns and cities. But as somebody said to me when I was showing them these slides, it looks like a virus. And unfortunately, I think that's certainly in Ireland, we are very threatened by this notion of urban living. We still haven't got our heads around it, and it's something we do need to do, because cities do hold the key to our 21st century challenges, cities and towns, collective living, because the simple principle is the more closely we live together, the easier it is to share resources, and those resources are precious and scarce. It's that simple. We do have good reasons to, I suppose, be distrustful of urban living, certainly in Ireland. Oh, my slides have gone a bit funny. But that's a shot from 1913, a tenement building in the north inner city. I mean, in Ireland, I suppose our collective memory is that urban living wasn't all that it cracked up to be, and people did understandably flee to cleaner and greener suburbs. But fortunately, that trend has reversed, certainly in Dublin, and the population of the inner city is growing. That is actually completely down to our immigrant population. When we talk about new neighbourhoods, and I think that is very much the theme of this particular session, well, the reality is the new neighbourhood in Dublin is the apartment complex. It's not a particular place, not Pelletstown, it's not the Docklands, it's the apartment complex. And yet we are very, very resistant to living in apartments. Living in apartments requires a very high degree of interdependency. And as Davie very wonderfully articulated earlier, we just aren't very used to that kind of interdependent living. But it's something we're going to have to learn. A third of all of Dublin City's homes are actually apartments, and 65,000. And most of them, 55,000, were built in the last 20 years. That slide just shows you the incredible trajectory of construction that peaked in 2008. Our standards are variable. I mean, apartments suffer, I suppose, have legacy issues. One of them being space standards, that many of our apartments are too small for families, and they're not actually seen. They weren't developed as homes, really. They were developed. With as an economic idea, a transactional idea. It was about investment. It was about speculation, and people, understandably, are very suspicious of that. We have also had very high-profile examples of apartment failures, and we are addressing those failures. But even when you take Priory Hall, the incredible work that had to go into solving the Priory Hall issue, from the Taoiseach had to intervene and redesign, new systems had to be redesigned to actually deal with the Priory Hall issue because of the degree of interdependency involved. Another important issue that we haven't quite got our heads around, and they are getting their heads around in other cities and countries, is that if we want more people living in towns and cities, we have to afford them the same level of amenity that they can enjoy in the suburbs and in the countryside. And that means that there's a little tagline that's missing from the slide, which is that densification and greenification go hand in hand. I live in the North Inner City. I only pass about 5 trees on my way to work, and one of them is in my front garden. I want more trees. And I think people who live in towns and cities need green. It can be done inventively, but it does require buy-in from everybody, including developers. I asked a developer recently when we were having a discussion about our apartment standards, which everybody's saying in Dublin City Council are too high. What were they thinking about offering by way of compensating amenity if we were to reduce these apartment standards? And we discussed things in abstract, and I said, what about greening? And they said, what do you mean? I said, well, greening, I mean, greening the buildings, green walls, offering people, maybe making it easier for people to plant on their balconies, etc., etc. And I regret to say the answer from one of the developers was, Anna, we wouldn't want to allow people to plant on their balconies because it would look very untidy. Okay, right, okay. We do have, and I'm glad Anne Phelan is here and has been promoting the work of the public sector. We actually have built fantastic examples of housing, apartments over the last 10, 20 years that are social housing. And I think the private sector need to actually look at what the public sector have done and emulate it. We need to think differently. How am I doing for time? Okay. I just want to talk very briefly about 2 projects. One is it's an event we had last year, a programme we started last year called Hidden Rooms. In Dublin City Council, we brought together 350 participants. Emma Gagan was one of them, and thank you, Emma, for giving up your time. We discussed 16 city issues. We broke the 350 delegates into 16 groups, dispersed them around the city into 16 remarkable hidden rooms, and asked them to put their minds to solving one of 16 critical issues. We grouped the issues under 4 themes. How do we make Dublin smile, as in social issues? How do we connect Dublin? How do we use our cultural strengths to connect different groups? How do we make Dublin flow, which is about the economics of a city? And how do we make Dublin lighter, which is about environmental issues? And under the economic theme, we looked at the whole issue of apartment living. And one area that I think we really need to get our heads around isn't how we design brilliant apartments into the future. It's how do we deal with our existing apartments, those 65,000 existing apartments. And so over the course of the day, we came up with a pilot project proposal, which we will be promoting over the next couple of weeks. And I think people who are attending today are exactly the kind of people who might want to get involved in this pilot project. So please keep an eye out for it. And essentially what we're doing is we're borrowing from a very successful model in the States run by the American Institute of Architects called the Design Action Team Program. It began in 1967. It was inspired by the civil rights movement. And basically what happens is a group of volunteers, experts across all kinds of areas, finance, planning, architectural, whatever, come together at the request, the invitation of a community, and workshop with the community how the community might address a particular issue they have. It's not just to put together a vision, it's also very importantly to put together an implementation strategy. And then the community, because they are part of that brainstorming process and the creative process, they then take ownership of the solutions. We are going to actually initiate one of these, a design action team program in Dublin, and we're going to work with a group of existing apartment owners to help them address maybe what issue they might have, and help them collectively to come together to finance, or to either devise and finance whatever the solution is. It might be to create a rooftop garden. It might be to create some communal space using 1 or 2 apartments. We don't know what it is, but it'll be something. And then very quickly, the Dublin House project. This was an idea that has taken forever to get to. The idea is about trying to, I suppose, reinvent the idea of apartment living. The idea was developed in a workshop in 2009, and here we are, years later, trying to actually apply it to a pilot project site in Fishamble Street. I'll just go forward to the end. This is the site on Fishamble Street. What we've done is we've offered this Dublin City Council-owned site. We've offered it to a group of people to come together and develop it as private apartment buildings. The carrot is that they get to design their own apartments. So why would Dublin City Council do that? Because I think we need to actually get people thinking apartments and get people wanting to live in the city centre. Thank you.
So we've been working on Nimble spaces, and we've been working with several different community groups who's seeking for to understand and to improve the mode of their living. And while we're conducting that a project, we found out that conundrum. It's a supported and shared, and a private and being independent. Is it in a linear progression? There was an awful lot of conversation about you want to be more private and more independent, but at the same time you want to be supported emotionally or physically, and you want to share things. But it seems like all bit muddled up. So we started thinking, actually, oh, that went wrong. That meant to have another arrow between supported and independent. Is it the scale from the independent to supported actually quite different from what is private to shared? Private and shared, what we found, are quite easy to identify, because that's quite a physical, architectural, and your day-to-day habit. We can actually quantify it quite easily. Where supported to independent, it's qualitative, and it's quite difficult. Sometimes it's quite emotional subject to really talk about. So while we're thinking about this, let's think about what is co-housing, because there seems to be a preconception about what co-housing is, especially in UK context. A lot of people think it's some kind of cult or some kind of the wider. You need to be more independent. You need to be your own being, and a lot of people has been put away by the idea that the co-housing is not something for them. So we applied for RIBA grant, which we thankfully received last year. So we're just about starting this research. So we started looking at what kind of co-housings do exist, and what people actually refer to as a co-housing, and how they are in a spectrum of to the most private to the most sharing. This is a quite quantifiable areas, your day-to-day routines, like from the meal and from the space and childcare and that kind of things. The quite interesting thing, we're gathering a lot more data out of this now. Quite interesting thing is, as you get more urban situation, you get more private, closer to private co-housing. Where you go to the rural setting, you get more shared, almost entire life. We don't exactly know why, although we can speculate, but we are gathering stage at the moment. We are looking at it. Oh, it's all gone wrong as well, actually. PC and Mac battle. Mac wins, as you said. I'm going to skip this one. Anyway, this is our first stab at a diagram as a single household. Mostly in a center, you have a private space. Either you're an individual or personal house the individual household, and your influence of sharing to the public arena grows, from the childcare and cooking to living room and your pets, and then it goes to like storage spaces, carpool, guest rooms and things. And suburban houses are built on diagram of individual households just touch each other, maybe, with a garden walls going by. But when we're actually looking at the lots of different co-housing examples, just looking at that diagram, putting into the series of understandable graphical notion, we're starting to see lots of different patterns emerge, lots of different mode of sharing, and these are constant flux within one community of the co-housing, which I find it quite fascinating. This is not about really the design of the building, but it's about the governance of who's actually living there. Intergenerational changes, the individual circumstance changes, and that's what really makes what co-housing the co-housing. So for us, we're very much interested in the idea of the mode of living that is based on a trust and a positive behavior towards sharing, and the benefit of pooling resource in living together. This is quite an important urban situation in terms of sustainability and the physical constraints, but at the same time, the huge part is we want emotional supports and something that's very human about it. So for next about a year or two, we'll be digging into this as much as we can. But we're not here to judge which co-housing model is better or worse. We are simply exploring that we are all different and there are very much different way of living. And we should be understanding and find a way to communicate each other what we really want. Thanks.
So this is, I think my little 8 minutes is a little bit of a very personal story rather than a kind of structural thing about co-housing. Because co-housing is about people living together, and our story is about people living together. And I think our story, actually, it fits here quite well, because our story is about being nimble, and our story was definitely about space. And Sturts Farm is a 100-acre farm. It was a very, very traditional Camphill community, because it started with just a few people deciding that they would move onto this farm with a group of people with learning disabilities and start growing healthy vegetables, biodynamic vegetables, and food, dairy produce and meat for other people. And that was its purpose. And there was nothing much more complicated than that, other than creating a lifestyle which worked for both groups. But as time went on, the support of people with a disability became much more specialist and much more regulated. And it was about 3 or 4 years ago, I sat opposite this commissioner and I said, I knew he didn't really like us because he just imposed a 25% cut on our funding. And I think he thought that we were kind of easy picking and that we wouldn't really know what to do. So I asked him what he thought about us. I just thought I'll just listen, see what happens. And he took a deep breath, and I could see from the movement of his chest that he had a lot to say. And as he started, and I won't tell you everything he said because it was a little bit overwhelming, but I started trying to defend myself from saying but, and then I thought, just give in and just listen. And he didn't like us. He didn't like what we were doing, and he didn't support us, and he said, actually, you're irrelevant. And irrelevant meant basically, I'm not going to shut you down, but I'm not going to support you carrying on, so you are going to close in a very short period of time. I'm not going to help you anymore. I don't want you here, basically. And so I had to ask him why. And he thought that that we had got really stuck in our practice, and that we were just farming. And at the time, we were living in family groups. And he felt that the people that we were supporting were not getting the choice that they should have. And that a lot of the stuff that we were doing, we'd got into a pattern, into a routine, into a habit of living in a certain way. And there wasn't any space for anybody to question it or to change it. And I sat back and I thought, you know, he could actually have a point. Because, you know, we were gardeners and farmers, so we did just live in routines. And so I after a little while of battling with this and quite a few things, I got ill, and I went on the internet and I thought, I'm just going to read something that isn't going to stress me out or worry me or anything. And I came on this thing with Threshold Co-Housing Community, and there was this lovely man when I lived in St Albans once told me, you know, you could be a co-housing community. And then I thought I better start listening, and then something remarkable happened to our community in Sturts Farm. Because you see, I think what had happened was, what the authorities were interpreting was that we were living this community lifestyle as a model of providing support. So and they were living in a world of personalisation and individualisation, where people with disabilities should be directing what's happening to them. And he was seeing the way we were living as a model of supplying support, whereas the initial intention had been to live on that farm and grow vegetables together. It hadn't been a way of offering support to people with a disability. It had been a way of sharing life. But the community had been seen as the model of providing the support. And that's and within family units. And this is the bit that he really didn't like. He thought that the family aspect of it was limiting choice, that the family was dominating the life of people with disabilities, and there wasn't enough choice for them to live the life they wanted. And so, just check where I am. So we were stuck, I think. We weren't nimble, and we needed to learn to become nimble. And then this kind of route to try and discover what co-housing was occurred. And what we did was we decided that we would that when we went to a co-housing community, it was all very familiar to us, the way people were living, apart from this thing of having your own front door and having control over your own home. So when people have been talking about developing and everything, all we did was to buy 4 eBay kitchens and to put them in some empty rooms. And we just divided up the accommodation, and then we converted one of the barns ourselves into a common house. And then we went on this legal process in order to reconstitute our community. And this was a remarkable process to go through as a charity, to say, actually, legally, our intention was to live together as equals, not for me to look after somebody else. That wasn't my intention. My intention was to live together with other people, to share life, share the ups and downs of life, and to do something together for other people. And in legally constituting the co-housing community, and for us to get right to reside alongside on an equal basis with our companions and go right through all of our routines and everything we did and decide how we were going to do it together was an incredibly empowering process, which meant that we actually had to give up. Actually, we were wielding a lot of power within the forms that we'd created, and that we hadn't given space for decision making. And we didn't give space for real diversity or for real conversation about things. We had been making up decisions, and we'd been following habits, and that we hadn't given space for this conversation about how do we want things to occur. And so now we've got to the point where we've got this legal agreement, and what it's done for us is to say, actually, all of us want to live in this legal entity which is called a co-housing community. And under that, and in that agreement, we are going to live life in this way. We're going to share meals. We are going to run things together. we are going to work freely without being paid within the co-housing context. And we are going to meet each other again as equals. And because in English law, everybody has to sign up to say where they want to live, the people we support have signed up officially and legally on a tenancy that they want to live in a co-housing community with us. And we've signed up as well. And so at that point, by separating the community off into a legal entity, they then can have a support contract to live in the way that they've chosen. So the community is no longer the way of delivering support. The community is now legally a way of living together. And it's created, so that's what pushed us to the cutting edge, in his view, that just by creating a bit of space and becoming a little bit more nimble, not just following your habits, but looking at things afresh and being prepared to change things, meant that he was really convinced that we'd gone through this kind of change process to reconnect to each other and to live. And then live in this co-housing community now as co-tenants, not as people, not as me looking after someone else or someone receiving care. And just from the last bit, just to say, from the point of view of how that's impacted on the community, and I've heard a lot of people talk about how do you develop these projects now, just that move has created a lot of interest from housing associations in the UK to carry on building and developing our community, so that we can become more diverse and have more people living with us, and that's my story.
Hi everybody, my name's McDonald. As Mark said, I'm involved in this Proficient. It's an EU-funded research project across 17 organisations across 8 EU countries, everywhere from Norway down to Romania, from the UK. We're trying covering all the different Mediterranean, Central and Eastern, Nordic and Western countries. We're looking at this concept we call collective self-organised housing, which is co-housing, and it's lots of people who live in an apartment block. How do they come together to all agree to fit double glazed windows? So it's everything from that end right through to just how do we get people to organise together to improve their neighbourhoods. So it's a whole spectrum of work. It involves not just new build, new neighbourhoods, though it certainly does that, but also about retrofitting, as I've said. We found that in Eastern Europe, it really is about living in horrible communist-era council tower blocks, which now have mixed ownership of rental, housing associations, social housing, and people who own them themselves, and all different sorts of reasons for people to say yes or no to contributing to some collective improvement of their lives or improvement of their buildings. New build, I think quite a lot of the issues that have already been raised, especially from the two of you, been really very relevant to the messages we're getting about new build. We're not just universities. Lancaster is the only university involved as a research organisation. Mostly it's architects, co-housing groups, engineering companies, construction companies, policy. We've even got a bank, the Husbanken in Norway, who are engaged with us, talking about finance. This is the main model I wanted to show you and talk very briefly, 2 minutes, on what we do. We're halfway through the project. The next slide is our contact details, because it's a research project and we want to talk to all of you because you're all interested. We'll start at that end. We're trying to map how different communities form, how they organise, what structures and tools they use. I was really interested this morning to hear about some of those design tools that people are using, and you may well get an email off me. We're looking both in terms of new build and in terms of retrofit, how communities organise. We're looking at the process of site selection and how those are required for new build, and about the building assessment processes for retrofitting. Through that, how user needs, how communities define their own needs and collectively organise for their own needs. We're looking at the performance requirements for new build and at the design requirements and how that iterative process goes on, how designers and small businesses can work with communities on those long-scale, drawn-out, 8 years for Lancaster Co-Housing, one of our partners, planning process. We're looking, and for this, we're designing a new software tool where communities can come together and map their land, this is particularly for new build, and start to design and change the designs of their properties in 3D, which has a running tally of cost. And as you improve the insulation, that might improve the initial cost, but reduce your lifetime costs of the building. So we're bringing in a very simple play tool, which eventually we'd like schools to be able to play with as a way of overcoming barriers to people even considering this. We're then moving towards the performance specifications and preliminary design undertaken with architects, and for this we're working with the European Union to change BIM systems, business information modelling systems, to allow a much more iterative process where designs can keep going back to clients and be constantly redesigned, and we're looking to alter the standards for BIM, which is a European standardised architectural tool, to allow that much more iterative co-design process. Very technical, I don't have anything to do with that. At the end of this, we want a housing platform. We're just trialling it at the moment, and if you look at our website, you can sign up for it, where communities can come together, where people can say, I want to build something in a co-design, or I want to be involved in a co-housing process in this area. So communities can come together online. Communities can play with these tools. Communities can draw together tenders. The other side of this is what we call an e-marketplace, where the small businesses who tend to deal with co-housing and retrofitting projects can come together to tender to deliver the projects that people have designed through these processes. The whole purpose of the project is it's very much focused, it's EU funded, on how the very small businesses who tend to work with this very niche market can scale up. How do we use a co-housing process, a community self-organised process, not to build or redevelop a Camphill community or the 10 homes or 20 homes in an existing eco-village? How do we use this approach to build 150,000 homes that Cologne say they need in the next 15 years? How do we scale this up? How do we provide an alternative to public housing where we box everybody with an acute social need over there, or developers providing identikit boxes on a hillside for us all to sit in our boxes, and go back to your conversation about people sitting in boxes? Is there not some way of scaling up this collective, communal, self-design process to meet district-wide solutions? And that's really what our project's about, working for new business models for the small businesses to be able to network and scale up to deliver solutions for people who wish to do this without having to involve large-scale developers who do not want to know about this type of process. Thank you.